If you are caring for someone else, whether paid or unpaid, and no matter how many hours you do it, did you realise that you may be missing out on thousands of pounds of discounts for things that you may use every day? The Able to Care podcast is proud to be sponsored by the UK's #1 carers card. Started by two best friends who recognise that carers deserve better and are 100% committed to helping to change the lives of all carers and bringing them together as a strong community. Carers Card UK provides support, recognition and rewards. It offers reassurance by providing an ID card that helps access emergency information when needed, while also unlocking discounts, a wellbeing hub, a carers circle tool and a community through their app. All of this for less than the price of a box of chocolates a year. There are discounts on gym membership, days out, electrical goods, clothing and even glasses. Let others know you care while taking a little care of yourself with an ID card you can be proud of. Visit carerscarduk.co.uk/promo code/able to care today to order yours. Welcome to the Able to Care podcast. I'm your host, Andy Baker, and today I'm joined by Dr. Stephen Barron, a psychologist who has spent decades transforming the way we understand and support children and adolescents. With over 30 years of experience as a school psychologist, Steve has worked closely with students, parents, teachers, and administrators to develop strengths-based strategies that truly make a difference. He's a sought-after speaker and trainer, presenting on the power of positive psychology in education and mental health. And his book, Teaching with a Strengths-Based Approach, How to Motivate Students and Build Relationships, is a must-read for educators and caregivers alike. We'll be exploring his insights, strategies, and the impact of positive psychology in education. So, Stephen, thank you very much for joining us today. Thoroughly appreciated.
My pleasure.
Tell us, what inspired you to write Teaching with a Strengths-Based Approach?
Well, for 30 years, I was a school psychologist. I worked in schools for young children, older children. And part of my job duties was to do evaluations, psychological assessments of children. And I noticed that over time, as I was doing these, there was a big emphasis on what's wrong with them. Why can't they do this? Why can't they read? Why can't they sit still? Why can't they do this, that, or the other thing? And I felt there really wasn't an appreciation. Well, what can this child do well? What assets? What does he bring to the table or she bring to the table? And I felt there was just like an overemphasis on how can we remediate the weaknesses as opposed to how can we build on the strengths. And after I retired from my school job a few years ago, it was sort of been a burning passion of mine. I made a bucket list of things I wanted to do in my retirement. And one of them at the top of the list was writing a book. So I'll just show, here is my book, Teacher with a Strength-Based Approach, published by Routledge. And I wrote a manual, kind of a handbook for teachers and how to integrate the principles of positive psychology into their classrooms. So for instance, how to help children identify their strengths, their buried treasures, if you will, if they don't know about it. How to incorporate optimism, gratitude, kindness into the school curriculum. And the key takeaway from my book, I think, is that by using a positive or strength-based model, looking at the assets of a child, it does an amazing thing to the relationship of the child and the teacher. It builds it and enhances it. And really, that is the most, I feel, a lot of research will bear me out, critical variable for academic and social success for children. Without that, I think kids will not be as effective and successful. And so my impetus for writing the book, circle back to your question, Andy, was to kind of put together ideas for teachers, how they can begin to look at the strengths of their students. And by looking at the strengths of their students, a big payoff is that it enhances their relationship with them as well. And they go together very, very smoothly with one another.
So was that a kind of an accumulation of kind of your experiences over those 30 years? Or was there any kind of light bulb moment you had about switching this concept over to the positive?
Yeah, there was a light bulb moment actually. I knew for a period of time myself, and members of my evaluation team, other professionals, um, we felt kind of, by looking at the negative, we felt it sort of promotes a despair, a hopelessness. We're always fixing what's wrong. And one day, I got a flyer in the mail about a conference given by a psychologist here in the States named Dr. Robert Brooks. And he's written a lot about resilience in children and a positive psychology model. And I went to see him. I didn't know much about him, but I went to his all day conference, and it was really a revelation for me. I mean, he was articulating and putting into words the ideas that I felt I wanted to act on, that I needed to do, but I wasn't able to do it. And or I didn't know the framework of how to do it. I wasn't as intimately familiar with positive psychology prior to that. I just knew I didn't like emphasizing the negative all the time. And that was just that was the light bulb moment, Andy. That really was. And from then on, I really tried to immerse myself in that framework. I'm also in private practice here in the States, and I used it in my clinical work with children privately and their families. And I tried to bring it into the school. And that was, not as smooth because schools have cultures, any organization has a culture. And it was sort of upsetting the apple cart a little bit. But I did what I could. And, I, and I and I wanted to write something about this. And when I retired, that was my impetus to do. I want to bring this information to teachers and have help them incorporate it into their lives and as their professional lives.
Mm. As you mentioned there, the culture of some schools may be not synonymous with these ideas, which is unfortunate. And that's definitely something, I've encountered. So, I mean, you are preaching to the converted here, I promise you, but what would you say? Why do you think there is this slight impetus to focus on the negative, or why do you think that's maybe culturally ingrained a little bit?
Well, I think it's a couple of reasons. I think that's true in a lot of places. I think, in particular, to me, in my situation, my job was to determine if children had what's called an educational handicapping condition, a disability. So there was this bias built in from the beginning. Are they learning disabled? Do they have attention deficit disorder? And that was sort of the lens that we had to look at children through. And then we would put all the data together that we accumulated, and we would make a determination: is the child have a disability, educational disability, or not? So I think when that's kind of your end game, it sort of forces you to think that way. Also, I, I think too that by identifying weaknesses in children, it kind of puts the onus on them. Okay, that they need to change. And I think instead of saying, well, how do we bring out the strengths of children? How do we help them identify? That puts some of the emphasis on, in both situations, the adults need to work with the children. But I think identifying strengths, and sometimes they're buried treasures and they're not so easy to find, it involves a little more detective work on our part, I think. And so sometimes that's easier to do, sometimes it's more difficult to do. If you get a resistant child, they don't make it so easy sometimes. So, in fact, in my clinical work, when I meet a child or a parent for the first time, the child sort of has an understanding, depending on their age, that they're there to see me for some issues or some challenges. But I always make it a point to ask the child and the parent when I meet with them, what are they good at? What do you do well? What are your assets? What do you think you do well? And so a lot of times I'll get a child, I don't know. And I'll say, that's okay. I said, that's fine. I said, one of our jobs here is going to be to try to figure out what you can do well. And because everybody does something well. And that could be one of the things we can try to figure out. So I want to set a tone right away that, yes, we'll address whatever needs to be addressed in terms of challenging behaviors, but we also are not going to leave it at that. We want to be able to bring out the best in yourself. And I think that that message conveys a sense of hopefulness and optimism as opposed to despair and, okay, the child is this wrong, that wrong. So I think it's a different mindset. And I think it allows a child to buy into it. So, yeah, I think is part of the reason. I also think the part of the reason why that attitude permeates in schools, I think they look at things through a medical model. At times, the medical model, look, it's been very popular and very helpful in medicine. We do need to know what the symptoms are. We do need to know what the pathological processes are that are perpetuating illnesses. But when we apply it to mental health, um, not such a smooth transition. And but I think that's the mindset that people have. We have to fix what's wrong. And sometimes it's easier to look at what's right. And that's that old saying, you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar, You try to bring out the positive resources they have within. So I think those are some of the reasons why that is that way.
Yeah, there's definitely a predisposition for people catching the negative, as you said, and the medical model is a prime example where actually that is a benefit. I need to catch what's wrong, what isn't working in my body properly that maybe we need to look at and explore. But there is this real difficulty, isn't there, when it comes to academic or when it comes to cognitive development and things like that, where it does need to be a very different approach. And as you said, there's the hopefulness. I'd rather go home at the end of the day having found 7 things a kid is good at than the 20 things that they've done wrong that day. It's just, I've done it again. He's done it again. I've had a bad day. He's done this. He's messed up with this. And it's so easy to kind of hyper focus on those. And I think sometimes when people when they're noticing those, they become more obvious. It's like I buy the new car and suddenly I start to notice that same make and model on the road all over the place. It's not because there is more of that car. It's now because I'm noticing that car. So the more that people are talking about the weaknesses of the child or the deficits of the child, the more they start to notice the weaknesses of the child and the deficits of the child. And there's some really interesting studies, isn't there, related to potential influences of prejudice towards academic achievement, that the belief that certain people, like the stereotype of like Asians being better at maths, for instance, seems to then impact the belief that Asians are better at maths, seems to actually impact on how well the Asians or the individuals of Asian descent within a group actually achieve. Not because they are actually better, but because the perception is they're going to be better and therefore I push them more, I believe in them more, I encourage them more. And there's so much around prejudicial models around that, as far as the expectations from teachers, from parents that feed into your model.
Absolutely. 2 points to your comment. When you said you try to find the 7 things the child does well, not focus on the 20 that they struggle with. In my work with kids, a colleague gave me this once, this idea, and I really like it. That at the end of the day, if you feel that you could make someone's life 1% better, just 1% better, 1% happy, it's a good day. And because you may not be able to do that for everybody, but if you could feel there's an impact, even a small one, that's a start. And to your point about prejudice, there was a study in the 1960s in New York. There's a psychologist named Robert Rosenthal, and he wrote a book about this called Pygmalion in the Classroom. And what he did, he approached a bunch of 5th grade teachers. 5th graders were about 11 years old or so, at the beginning of the school year, and said, I did cognitive assessments on your class. And he had permission to do this through the schools. And he told his teachers, I cognitively assessed your students. So and so and so and so and so and so are academic all-stars. These children were extremely well. And they're going to be, your stars. And Rosenthal had his staff follow the progress of these children of the class throughout the year. And those students who were identified, they had higher grades, they had much fewer behavioral issues, they had better social relationships. The relationship between the teacher and the student was also different. The teacher gave the student more eye contact, spent more time talking with them, seemed to be more supportive. And these students, it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. They were the academic all-stars. However, at the end of the school year, Rosenthal approaches the teachers and says, I have to tell you something. I never tested these students. I don't even know who these students are. I randomly picked names on your roster, and I said to you that I tested them. And the reason I did that was I wanted to assess what your expectations would be of the student. And I'm not sure how the teachers felt about that. Some people were upset. Oh, you misled the subjects. It was, and there's a point to that, I guess. But it doesn't change the findings. And the findings were that these children who were identified in such a way as being so positive, it did impact the way the teachers looked at at the children. It did impact how successful these kids were socially and academically, and the teacher's perception of the students. So the kind of mindset, I think, if a teacher comes into a situation thinking, okay, what's right about these kids? What can I work on? What can I bring to the surface for these children? It does impact how they relate to kids and how the kids relate back to them. It's a feedback loop. It goes back and forth. So I do think, expectations, mindsets, the assumptions that we make about other people in any relationship, not just in the classroom, but in any relationship, are going to impact how we think and feel and behave towards the other parties and how they're going to respond to us.
It's inevitable, but it's something that maybe so subtly people don't realize, what an impact it makes, as far as especially change is concerned. So what are the specific, do you have some of the specific methods within your book, within your work, to help people and teachers and parents to kind of shift over that mindset a little bit?
Well, yes. The short answer is yes. In my book, I do talk about one of the chapters is how to become a strength-based teacher. And one of the things I suggest to teachers, especially if they're feeling kind of negative or a little burnt out, is I talk about how to help them get in touch with the joy they felt. Why did they become a teacher? What was it, aside from whatever practical considerations there are in terms of salary or time off in the summer or what have you. But what drove you to want to work with children? What drove you to want to influence and be a positive influence in their life? There's a concept in psychology called a charismatic adult. A charismatic adult is a term developed by a psychologist named Jules Siegel. And it doesn't mean somebody who is flamboyant and has an outgoing personality. It's somebody from whom a child can gather strength. And it's usually a teacher, could be a coach, could be a mentor, obviously could be a parent. And so I think one of the things I talk about in the book is to try to help teachers get in touch with what made them go into this business in the first place, so to speak. What made them choose the career where they can impact students in such a potentially positive way and powerful way. You know, the ideal would be for a teacher to convey to a student at the beginning of the school year, I am excited to be your teacher. I know we're going to do great things together, and I'm here for you when the going gets tough. And just to be able to convey that to a child, I think, is very, very important. And one of the ways I think that teachers can help children see that part of themselves and is helping kids identify their hidden strengths and assets. How could we do that? So one exercise I talk about, it's a counseling exercise, but I think it's applicable to the school classroom, is you could do it in a group or individual basis. You could give the children or have the students draw an outline of a mountain, just a template of an empty mountain. And at the bottom of the mountain, every day or every other day, however often you wish to do it, the student can put in something they do well, one strength. And if a student has trouble doing that, you can perhaps question or offer some suggestions. So each day or each time you do it is another strength, until eventually the mountain is filled and you have this mountain of strength. So then you can hang up the mountains and children can be surrounded by their strengths and maybe have a little party celebrating the assets of the children. But I think it's a communication to kids that I think you could do things well. And look at all the beautiful things that you could do. Maybe you didn't know you can do it. So I think that's one in terms of developing strengths. Also in the book, I talk about different sentence stems or sentence completion exercises where you can give children like, 15, 20 things. My parents are really proud of me because something I do well is what what makes me a very good friend is, 15 to 20 sentence stems that you can give children to fill out. And then you could use it. You could go and get into a conversation with children about that. And what could they give examples of that? You really want to help them see themselves as having assets and able to tap into it. And there may be teachers in your audience, Andy, who may think, well, this is all well and good, but I have a curriculum I have to teach, and I have to cover this, and I have to cover that. And in the States here, we have an issue where kids are given achievement tests, and there's a whole controversy about teaching to the test, and I have to teach to the test, and that's how I'm going to be assessed, and I don't have time. And I understand, and that's a fair point. But I would say to those teachers that it doesn't have to be either or. You don't have to decide between either covering classroom content or curriculum or working on building assets and helping children identify, what they can do well. And I think one helps the other. If you have children who are confident and who see themselves in a way that they're capable of doing good work and great things, I think it's going to make it easier for you to teach them. I think it's going to be easier for them to be successful in the classroom and to cover the work. So I think there has to be a way to integrate both. It doesn't have to be we're just going to teach math and that's it. Um, I think it's very important to give students the tools or the framework. You can't build a house, you can't build a roof unless you have the foundation. So we need to establish the foundation, I think, before you can add to it. So that would be one, for instance, in answer to your question.
Yeah, I really like both of the examples you gave there, as far as the word stem as well as the mountain as well. And I think it shouldn't be underemphasized, the importance of building that self-esteem to allow the child to actually believe in themselves that, yeah, I can learn this. If I keep messing up and every time I make a mistake, slowly we're getting into the realms of learned helplessness and things like that. What's the point in trying? I always get it wrong anyway. That straight away by promoting, yeah, but you did that right, you did that right, you did that right, you did that right, which means it opens up their mind to the possibility that maybe I can overcome challenges. Maybe I can learn this, rather than just shutting down and going, I always mess up. What's the point in listening?
Two points come to mind when you were saying that, Andy. One is when I was a student in high school, I had a lot of trouble in math, and I had a teacher who was not very supportive of me. I remember one time I took a math test, and I had a tutor. My parents got me a tutor. I failed. I did not do well, and I was stunned. I said, "Oh my goodness, I studied," and I was hopeful I passed. So I went to the teacher and I said, I don't know what to say. I studied, I tried. And so the teacher looked at me and said, well, Steve, maybe you should consider a career selling ladies' underwear. And I didn't know, is he being serious? Is he joking? Is he mean it? Well, the impact of that, I didn't say anything. I walked away. I went home that day. I told my parents, cancel the tutor. The light switch just turned off and I failed and I had to repeat the class. And I just had a very negative attitude about math. And I didn't feel supported. And I felt in that comment, he kind of validated that part of me, like, I can't do this. And in answer to your question about making mistakes, I think one of the things I talk about in the book is the culture of a fear of making mistakes, the culture of kids afraid they're going to mess up. And I think one of the ways that a teacher can handle that from day one is to have them come into the class, and as they're getting to know each other, I think the teacher should ask a question of the class. And the question could be, who here is afraid of making a mistake? And the first hand that goes up is the teacher's. And then the teacher can give an example of, an appropriate example of an error or a mistake that they made. Now, what that does, it begins to universalize the normalcy of making mistakes, that, okay, this teacher knows about mistakes and they accept mistakes. And so when the teacher then gives an example of them making a mistake, the teacher could take it a step further and then ask the class, who here has made mistakes? Who here has made errors? And hopefully that could promote children contributing in a conversation. And if we're lucky to get that going, the next step could be, well, since we all admit that we make mistakes, how can we support each other when we do make a mistake in this class? How is this community going to come together to support one another when we inevitably make a mistake? And I just think it's an important message. It takes away a fear that children have. You want them to begin to take risks for themselves as learners and socially as well, with other, getting to know more peers. So I think by making normal this concept of, we're all going to need each other at some point. We're all going to like fall short inevitably. How can we help each other? And I think that brings an element to the table of compassion, of understanding, and optimism. Okay, we made a mistake. We got you. We're there for each other. And you build and you learn from it. And that's how you do learn. Psychologists know that trial and error learning is one of the most effective ways of learning. And so if I'm learning to play tennis and I'm not a very good tennis player, and then it's pointed out to me, well, you're holding the racket wrong. You got to hold it this way, and you have to follow through in your motion. Oh, that's how I do it. Well, if I didn't make those mistakes, if I didn't do it incorrectly, I never would have really maybe appreciated how to do it correctly, unless I intuitively knew how to do it perfect from the get-go, which isn't likely. So
I think mistakes are such a strange thing. They do hold this kind of this real negative connotation in our culture and in society to some degree. Yet we all learn through, trying to stand up and falling down and keep getting up again. And it's about the resilience of overcoming mistakes that allows us to do pretty much anything in life. And part of I always kind of say that most of our greatest attributes come through adversity. Learning something and finding it easy to learn it isn't anywhere near as much of achievement as learning something that you found hard to learn. Being good doesn't come out without an essence of I choose not to do the evil things. If evil didn't exist, then it wouldn't be good anymore. And I think that's the same thing, isn't it? That there's an expectation that you're allowed to make a certain number of mistakes. You're allowed to make mistakes up until this particular age in this particular topic or subject or disability. So a 15-year-old who can't do 1 + 1 is then being chastised and negative and stuff like that, rather than, hey, maybe you haven't found the right way of learning this yet, and we haven't found the right way of teaching you this yet, and it doesn't mean you're never going to be able to do it, but our expectations are you should know this by this time. And I think obviously my specialism is around the behavioural side of things, but that ties in so much with the academic, exactly the same as far as the, just because you can't, it's not never, it's not yet, as far as that kind of growth mindset kind of mentality.
Yes, and that to piggyback on your point, and that's a good point. That word "yet," I don't know it yet, just promotes a whole different attitude. And I think, people take even in baseball, 3 strikes, you're out, you can't. And I think people take that mindset, that, okay, we're only allowed a certain amount of setbacks and disappointments and that's it, And I think, people people learn at their own rate, at their own speed. And we have to respect those differences. And yes, some children will learn it very quickly and other children not so much. But then I think it's instead of pointing a finger at the teacher, at that student, and saying, you're not, capable. It's the same thing in psychotherapy. Oh, this child is resistant. Well, maybe the therapist needs to think about how they're approaching the child to entice the child, to try to connect with the kid. And I think that's part of why this culture of negativity continues, as I said before, because there's an emphasis on the child has to improve, the child has to get better. The onus is on the child, the teenager. But maybe it's the therapist or teacher or the professional that has to kind of go back to drawing board a little bit and see, okay, is there a plan B? Is there another way I can reach or connect with this youngster?
Let me ask you a question. Do you ever find the pressures of supporting, teaching, or caring for someone else overwhelming and wish you had access to more support and information? The Able to Care podcast, in connection with Able Training, has created the ablehub.uk, where for less than the price of a coffee a week, you can access exclusive podcast content, resources, events, and over 45 certified online courses, covering topics like self-care, understanding dementia, neurodiversity, first aid, conflict management, financial advice, and so much more, with new content and courses being added each month. We are so confident that you will benefit from the Able Hub that we are offering 14 days access completely free of charge. No contract, cancel anytime. Become part of the ablehub.uk community and gain the support, knowledge, and resources you deserve. Don't struggle alone. Be able. Find the link in the description. I think it's an easy trap or an easy habit to create, isn't it? As far as focusing on the negatives, whether it be about yourself or whether it be about somebody else. And it is, I know that the kind of model you mentioned earlier, like the mountain example that you gave there of is creating that is finding opportunities to create the habit in an individual themselves to recognize their own, as you describe it, the kind of the treasure within, which I think is a lovely kind of concept related to it. And I think it's, I mean, obviously you come from that psychology background, with psychotherapy. Adults can do exactly that. And it's those little things though, isn't it, of creating a habit. So I know I've been through with, when I've been in low places, starting to get into the habit of going, what did I do today that was nice? And let's say I let somebody out in traffic, right? They would take for granted, just going, well, of course I did. That's just what I do. But it's finding that and going, well, what does that say about me? Well, that means that I was quite thoughtful. I was quite conscientious letting that person out in traffic. I didn't have to do that, but I did it. That means maybe I'm an okay person. And it's little opportunities to find the wins, isn't it? That, as you said, and the mountain example was wonderful. It's like stacking those up over a period of time to actually show that, the self-esteem is going to build as a result of that.
Absolutely. You talk about what are the wins? One of the things I tell children and parents to do, there's an exercise I talk about in the book called 3 Good Things. Right. So at the end of the day, you could either write it or say it softly and, hold your heart while you do it. What are 3 things that happened today that I appreciate? It's a gratitude exercise that I feel good about. And the thing that I tell the kids and the parents is, I don't want easy stuff like, well, I have a home, I'm healthy. You can do that on day 1. But on day 2, I want you to stretch what you're looking at. I want you to train your brain to look at the nuances and more subtle things in your life that say something positive about you. I had a great cup of coffee today. I had a fantastic conversation with my coworker. And of course, it could be obvious, like I got a promotion, or if you're a teacher, I think I made contact, I connected with a kid, however you want to do. But I think by trying to find 3 good things every day for ourselves and different things, not repeating the same things every day, we train our brains. We want to expand the lens and see things even that we may not even have thought about. But, that's significant. And yes, you did let that guy get in front of you on the road. And what does that say about? It says that you're very thoughtful. And I know, just to that example, a lot of times if I'm going down a street and someone's coming out of a lot, I will slow down. I'll let them go, and they wave, and I feel good about letting them go. I mean, unless I'm in a huge rush, but generally I let them go. So I think, and that's part of the strength-based positive psychology approach.
And one thing I think you'll find with that as well, and it probably sort of refers to this, that with that can change the culture. Little things can change the culture of an organization. Because you quite often find, if I let somebody in front of me in traffic, you often find when you do that, the person behind you lets the next person go, and the person behind you lets the next person go. And suddenly this positivity, this doing something nice is almost catching. And I think you can definitely get that, can I really make a difference? But I think it's like a bad apple can ruin the barrel, spoil the bunch, but the vice versa can occur. It's hard work, but I think it makes a big difference of suddenly you've got a few teachers. Because how often in a teacher's lounge do all the teachers going in and going, oh, dealing with little Billy today is such a nightmare. He's doing this. I've had this. And I completely understand that being a safe space that teachers go to vent. But how often do the teachers remember to go in there and go, I just had a really good class with Billy. I had a really good session with Sally. And little bits of going, you can have the moan, you can have the rant, but are you making a difference through that? I get the venting, but it feels cathartic, doesn't it? I suppose kind of my stress levels are up here. I've ranted, so that brought my stress levels down to here. But actually being calm and being okay is right down here. So I feel better because I've ranted, but I haven't actually improved my mood in the moment. But if actually I'd gone, what's gone well in that class? Who interacted really nicely? What did I get out of Billy that I don't use? Maybe better was yesterday. And so that's where actually we'd find that the culture of that staff room had potentially changed to a more, well, a nicer place to be. Because who wants to go to a room where everybody's moaning?
There's a concept in psychology called micro moments, where very small fragments of time, and there's research that talks about how positive micro moments, what that does for us. And it does a lot of good things for us. I mean, on a biological level, it releases hormones in our brain that go through our bloodstream that elevate our mood. And if our mood is elevated, to your point, Andy, then you're going to be more likely to want to pay it forward and do something nice. You had a positive interaction with somebody, you want to bring it forward and perhaps have a positive interaction with somebody else. And you're right, it is contagious. And look how quickly gossip and innuendo and negativity spreads. It's like wildfire, and especially on social media. But there's no reason why the opposite cannot be true.
No, definitely. Yeah, it's harder. As you say, bad news doesn't sell newspapers. Good news doesn't sell newspapers. It's definitely harder to work towards that. But I think it's almost reconditioning people, isn't it? To kind of get that mentality in there a little bit.
Yes. And I think you're right. I think in the moment when they're venting, sometimes we need to do that. And that's reinforcing because our feelings are confirmed and validated by those we're venting to in most cases. So we keep venting. But imagine if we went in and did what you said, said and teachers, listen, yes, Billy, may have, given me a run for the money today, but I was able to connect with Angela and Emily and Frank, and they were able to make progress in meeting the goals I have for the class. That gets lost.
It does. It does. And I don't think that's always, none of this is necessarily teachers' faults. It's culture, it's societal pressures or academic pressures and stuff like that, as you mentioned earlier. There's a lot of, there's an awful lot of pressure on, but it is that culture can change over a period of time. Definitely agree with you on that. So, obviously, we mentioned around teachers, and I think everything that you've said and mentioned, there's no reason why parents can't be initiating the same kind of principles with their children, having these positive conversations. Because if it's a bit universal, this isn't just something I do at school. I do it at home as well. Yeah, as you said with the parent.
It's so true. It's funny you say that because one of the projects I'm going to be working on in the new year, I'm going to be writing a book for parents using the strength-based model and parent-child interactions. And you're absolutely right. There is no reason why this should be limited to the classroom. And, one of the things I point out to parents come in to see me, oh, my child does A, B, and C, list all these, like a laundry list of all these like problematic behaviors. And one of the things I point out to parents is, look, if you're waiting for your child to have an epiphany and change, you're probably going to be waiting a long time. So, but we're the adults. And so if we want to promote change, it has to start with us. Well, for instance, I'll give you an example. I had one of the big complaints I get when parents come in is, oh, my child just spends time he doesn't talk to me. She doesn't talk to me. She's on that video game and she's playing and so on and so forth. And, we could talk about like setting limits and in terms of time on screen. But to me, that's like a missed opportunity. So, okay, your child has this hobby or this interest of playing. What do you really know about it? I don't know. They play. I don't. Well, do you actually sit with your child? Do you actually have your child explain to you how the game works? Do you actually understand what they do well in that game? Do you actually know what the skill set is that's necessary to do well in that game? Have you ever played with your child in that game? Usually I get silence, but I think it's important that is a golden opportunity to, and yeah, you have to make the first move as a parent. And yes, you have to maybe sit and play a video game or spend time doing something that you might not be too excited to do. That's fair. But if you look at the bigger picture, it's like a way to connect. Whenever I go into a restaurant and I see a family and everybody's got their phone in front of them, kids and adults, I say to myself, what a lost opportunity. Here they're sitting, they're with each other. I'm not saying you can never look on the phone, but when did I have a chance to have a conversation? When did I have, there was a study done in the UK a few years ago, and they said that for working parents, the amount of time they spend per day in face-to-face conversation with their children, not being distracted, but actually face-to-face conversation, was about 23, 24 minutes. Not a lot of time. And so I think we and I understand, parents are pulled in a gazillion directions, and there's a lot. It's a lot. It's hard, but that isn't a lot of time. And so I think you have to sort of invent the time and make the time, and look for opportunities where you can try to gradually integrate yourself into your child's life, and share, and become part of their world. See, instead of looking at and trying to get kids to conform to what you want, maybe we have to kind of meet them halfway and a little beyond that as well, just to make that connection. And then you have some leverage with your child. And if you need to bring up things, maybe they listen and they hear that in a way that they don't before.
Yeah, there's a concept that comes from a lot of the therapeutic parenting stuff that I've done, which is connection before correction.
I like that.
Yeah, why would I listen to you or take your advice or believe you if you haven't even taken the time to really get to know me and understand me? There's always going to be a disconnect from that. So if I'm looking to, so connection before solution, connection before correction, whichever one it is that you were looking to achieve, there's so many of whether it be there's the study that I've spoken about on the podcast a few times, which is the 2 minutes for 10 days study with teachers, which is just pick your most challenging student, spend 2 minutes with them for the next 10 days, just talking to them, engaging with them. Don't tell them to do anything. And it made such a difference to the outcomes, both for the students, but also the way the teachers felt, a bit like the example you gave earlier. Speaking to another colleague the other day on the podcast, she just said 10 minutes for a parent to interact, making it as quality rather than quantity. It's 10 minutes that's all about you rather than anything else. It's focusing on their strengths, not correcting them, not telling them what they should or shouldn't be doing, how they should be playing the game. Just play the game with them. Let them have their rules for that 10 minutes. It doesn't matter. Yeah, absolutely.
Becoming part of it. And so maybe those 19 or 23 minutes a day become more meaningful for you and for them. One of the things I noticed when I was working in the schools, that there were some teachers who the children would go into the classroom in the morning and the teacher would just nod or not say anything. Other teachers, good morning, Jim. I'm so glad you're here today. Happy to see you. Glad you could make it. And again, those micro moments, as I mentioned before, as you alluding to, it's like planting a seed. These little seeds, and you plant enough little seeds, and you get like a big flower. And I think that's the payoff. We want to plant enough of these micro moments, these seeds, to build something bigger in terms of a relationship, which is the most critical variable, I think, one of the most critical variables in terms of student success and happiness. The U.S. Department of Education published a study a while back, and its conclusion was the most important variable to promote safe schools where there's not bullying, where there's not misbehavior, is the presence of adults that kids feel care about them and are interested in them. And that was like the elixir they kind of felt to really prevent problematic behaviors. We're all wired for connection. We're all wired for it. And some children may not have enough of it in their lives at home for whatever reason. Think about how many minutes the teacher spends with their students. 1,300, 1,500, 1,800 minutes over a course of 10 a school year. It's a lot of minutes.
One of my favorite, I remember seeing a video online ages ago. And as we were talking there, it just reminded me of it. And all it was a teacher outside the classroom. And as the students kind of arrived, every single one of them out in the queue, they had a very specific personalized handshake that they did with that teacher. And as you kind of like, the high five, low five, and all the bits and pieces, the fancy handwork and stuff like that. But every single one of the students had a personalized one that they were the teacher. Some were like real simple and they're just like a fist bump, thumbs up and nothing more. Others were quite elaborate with almost a little dance involved and stuff like that. But what a sense of interconnectedness, what a sense of collaboration, what a sense of, hey, this is a place that values me, and this teacher, this person, obviously has taken the time to learn and memorize. I don't know how he'd done that. That was quite phenomenal. But yeah, I thought it was a wonderful example of exactly what you're referring to there, of that creating that inclusive environment that celebrates the individuality, but also celebrates the kind of the similarity.
And that's me. That's just for me, that handshake, and it makes me feel special that, Mr. Jones or Mrs. Jones, are doing that just for me. And it pays big dividends. You're right.
There was something else when you mentioned the story earlier, I think, with the girl with the doing the register monitoring to help get her. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's such a useful tip as well. And it's one of the things that I kind of refer to an awful lot is we often know what we don't want a child doing, but we haven't figured out what we do want them doing. And if we don't know what we do want them doing, then how are they supposed to? As you said, you're the adult. And it made me think of an example of one way of overcoming bullying is there was a school who did this where, this lad was getting bullied by this bigger lad, this slightly dominant lad. And rather than telling the bully off, what they did is recruited him and going, this lad's struggling a little bit. He seems to be struggling to fit in. He seems to be being picked on and he's finding it really, really hard. I know how well respected you are in the class. I know what, you're quite high up and other people respect you and listen to you. Will you give you the responsibility of looking out for him, helping him to overcome this? And by shifting that, because why are many bullied? Because they're desperately seeking some level of validation and some level of power and control over their life. Well, they gave him that through positive behavior rather than telling him off, trying to take it away from him. So it was a wonderful example.
That's great. I love that. I mean, that's a great example, Annie, of how we look at behavior, but what is the need behind the behavior? What? And you're right. In that case, the bully may have been looking to exalt power over somebody and to elevate himself. Maybe he didn't have great self-image, whatever, but he was looking to feel very potent and very strong. So take that need and channel it in a way that it pays dividends, not just for him, but for others as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's great. That's a wonderful story.
So obviously you put together this work and you're giving talks and you're giving lectures and teaching teachers about this. So what you've given, even in the chat that we've had today, you've given quite a few lovely little nuggets as far as a few exercises and things like that. What would you say is probably the one of the best strategies you know of that can help teachers, parents? And I think a lot of the stuff you've been talking about as well, we have a lot of carers, whether it be foster parents, or whether it be caregivers of children, all the way up to, I teach an awful lot around the dementia world, and strengths-based approaches within the dementia field is massively important. It's not focusing on what their deficits are and what they're losing. It's still focusing on what they're still able to achieve because it builds self-esteem, improves mental health. So this is the stuff you're talking about isn't just for children and teachers. This is universal across how humans should treat other humans, basically.
That's exactly right. It is how humans should treat humans. And two examples come to mind, two other strategies. One I talk about is called a gratitude flower. So for young children, you can give them, and even young adolescents I've done it with, they could draw a template of a flower, or you could get one online. You could have like a circle in the middle. They could put their name in the petals. And in each petal, they put something that they're grateful for, something that they appreciate about themselves, about the world. And then when it's filled in, you put it on the wall. Everybody puts up their template, and you have a garden of gratitude in the classroom. And then we talk about the things that we're grateful for and we share. And as I think that's a very positive message to get. So children come in every day and they're surrounded by these really good things. And if they're having a rough day, look at that. Didn't you say that you're grateful for this, this, and that? So just to kind of shift the mindset. Another thing I like, I talk to children, I would tell teachers to break kids up in a group of like 4 or 5 and give each student an index card with a name of the other child, with a name, and each index card has the name of a student in that group. And you go around the group, and the student does not get their own card, but each student has 60 seconds to write as many positives, compliments they can give about the student on the other side. Then 60 seconds are up. Rotate, then the next person, everybody fills in, but you don't do yourself. And at the end, when all the cards are done, the teacher collects them and then gives them out to the class, not to the students. They don't get their own card. And then the person who gets the card, the student, has to do a little presentation, like an award. We're giving so-and-so an award. Like to do like like a little speech, based on the compliments that the student has gotten. And I think that, parents and, that's a way to help children appreciate the goodness in others. I think to your point, Andy, it's very important to take that mindset and apply it to relationships across the lifespan. Even when there's challenging times, what are the positives? What do I really see or value in that person? What do they do for me? What do I see them do for others? And so forth. So I think it's very important to keep that positive mindset and to accentuate the positive when it's realistic. I'm not saying to make things up, but it has to be genuine. But we need to look. We need to look for the gold statue.
There is a bit of a culture. I don't know whether this has happened in America as well, but like sports days, we no longer have competition because everybody should be a winner. And there's a bit of a concept. And I don't want people to confuse that as positive or strength-based approaches, because I think that can be detrimental, and I have my reasons. But I wondered how you felt about that concept of we don't want kids to be competitive because everybody should be a winner, and we don't want kids to feel lesser than because of this concept. Yeah. Have you come across that? Do you have that in America?
We do come across that. I do talk about it in the book. And I think, one of the things we have to look at when we work with children is not so much the outcome, but the effort. That, it's just the thing, like if I don't get a high grade or if I don't get a perfect grade, I'm a failure. And, I didn't win the game, I stink. But I think it's important to promote like a growth mindset where you're willing to take chances and risks. One of the keys to do that is to help children look at the effort they put into something. So if a child doesn't win the trophy or they don't do as well on the test as they would like, I think it's important for them to talk to them about, number one, how hard did you try? Oh, I tried really hard. I studied. Okay, and this is what it was. This is the outcome. But how can you build upon this? 2 children that I worked with that I knew. I'll never forget my child when he was younger played baseball, and there was a baseball game, and this boy gets up to bat. He was about maybe 10, 11 years old, and he swings and swings and swings, and he strikes out. And what does he do? He takes the bat, he throws it on the ground, he swears at the umpire, the person calling balls and strikes. He goes to the dugout where the other team is, and he takes his glove and he throws it. He has a meltdown, an absolute meltdown. He starts crying. And I'm thinking, I'm sure the parents were mortified. They were there. I'm thinking, is this how this child responds every time he falls short of something? Is this how this child responds to a disappointment? In contrast, I'm working in therapy with 15, 16-year-old boy who has learning challenges, and he has a very, very difficult science test coming up. And we talked about it, and he was nervous about it, but he put in a lot of time to study. So he takes the test and he fails. And what does he do? He goes to the teacher, not to complain, not to get him to change the grade, but to say, okay, I tried really hard on this. I really want to understand where I fell short. I really want to understand what I need to do better. Show me. And that's a different approach So sometimes, look, we should recognize when people do well, obviously. But if a child doesn't do well, it doesn't mean that they're a failure, but how hard did they try? Can they modify their effort in the future? Are there any skills they need? It's funny you asked this question. Well, one of my sons, I have two sons, got a promotion at work last week, and he was very excited about it. And he went to the holiday party at the company he works for, and there was another fellow at the holiday party who's at my son's age and the same level in the company who did not get a promotion and was very angry, angry at the company. And he was happy for my son, so he said, but he was very angry at the company. And to me, like if you had had that conversation with me, I would have said, well, okay, well, look at the reality. Are there limits on a number of people that can be? What is the reality? Maybe there were practical, real world reasons why you couldn't get that promotion. And secondly, maybe you need to get feedback. Maybe you should go to your boss and say, okay, what do I need to work on? What could be a short-term, long-term goals for me to work on where I can be considered for a promotion? So I think to your point, Andy, giving everybody a trophy, it may feel nice in the moment, but is it robbing a child of an opportunity to self-reflect, learn, and put in the effort to get better at something? Do they rest on that laurel, or maybe can they take it a step further and try to actually improve on what they're doing instead of feeling, oh, I got the trophy, I'm good. And maybe they're not. Maybe they can do better.
Yeah, but 100%. I think it's important. So, using a strengths-based approach is I think is an incredible strategy towards building self-esteem, as we touched on earlier. The benefits of self-esteem are going to be improvements, improved outcomes as a result of that, and improved resilience and confidence and things like that. But self-esteem isn't built through just being told you're good. It's about doing good. It's about achieving. It's about mastery, and then being helped to recognize those skills and those abilities and that mastery. The kids aren't dumb. If that kid runs faster and we both get the same trophy, I'm not going, hey, well, I don't need to try hard because I get stuff anyway. It should be a case of looking and going, well, he is faster than me. So either I need to practice more, work harder, do better, or maybe I'm never going to get it faster, but maybe running ain't my thing. But I'm amazing at shot put, and that's my thing, and leaning into the strengths and recognizing. And that's, again, feeding into the model that you're referring to there, isn't it? As far as, it's not just about telling all kids they're wonderful. It's about helping them to recognize that they are wonderful from the things that they achieve and they do. It's probably the best
and give them realistic appraisal of what they might be wonderful in, and let them know that if they make the mistake, they fall short, it's not the end of the world. It's not a setback. It could be an opportunity, to go. It's how you frame it. It's how you tell you. If you tell yourself, I'm horrible, where do you go with that? There's really you're boxing yourself into a corner. But if you say, well, this is an opportunity. Look, I'm disappointed. I really wanted to do this, but okay, what do I have to do to change this? How can I improve? And I'll try to do the best that I can. And the best that we can may or may not be good enough to get the outcome we want, but at least we know we're doing what we can.
Yeah, love that. Okay, fantastic. Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, and I think I'll definitely add your book into my list. Which there's a fair list. I will warn you for so many books I need to read. Not enough time in the world.
I know.
If only I was better at reading.
Yeah.
But is it on audiobook? Because that does make my life easier.
Yeah, my book, it's called Teaching. I'll just show you. Teaching with a Strength-Based Approach: How to Motivate Students and Build Relationships. I think it's on Amazon and published by
It is on
Routledge.
Amazon. Yeah, I checked earlier. It's you got a hard copy version of it, which is very, very specialist, I think.
Well, the reason there's a hardcover version, which is super expensive. You don't have people don't have to, but that's I asked the publisher, why is there a hardcover? It's for colleges and universities. Some colleges order it for their libraries. But this is the paperback version, and this is a lot less expensive. So
I think it's on Kindle as well, from what I saw. So available on all formats. Yeah, it's available in all formats from
In all
all good
formats,
bookshops.
yes,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you.
And we'll make sure we put a link and the name of the book in the show notes, and obviously details of how people can contact you and reach out to you as well. And we're putting that in the show notes as well.
Feel free. If people would like to email me, reach out through my website, Dr. Steven, STEVENBARON.com. And my email address is DrSteveBaron@gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to hear your successes and whatever else you'd like to share.
Fantastic. Yeah, we'll put all those details in the show notes or the description on YouTube as well. But otherwise, for anybody who's listening, if you found anything that you found useful or interesting or want to explore more, please reach out to us or comment and share, and then do reach out to Dr. Stephen Barron as well. But it's been a fantastic conversation. I generally think we are very aligned in our views, and I think
very much so.
we could potentially go on a journey, and we'll talk in a moment about parenting books and stuff like that, because joint plans on that as well. So yeah, fantastic to have a conversation, and maybe we'll have a chat again one time, and when your next book comes out.
I would love that. Thank you very much.
Have you ever encountered an adult or child's behaviour that has felt difficult, overwhelming, or challenging? Have you sometimes felt at a loss of what to do, or know that you didn't handle it quite right? People are complex and unpredictable, and their behaviour can be like the weather. We've all made the mistake of looking out the window and feeling safe to wear shorts, but 5 minutes later wishing for an umbrella. What if, like a weatherman, you understood how humidity, temperature and pressure all come together to cause the weather, allowing you to better prepare, predict and respond, and prevent ever having a picnic ruined by a thunderstorm ever again? My book, called Targeting the Positive with Behaviours that Challenge, helps you to become the weatherman of behaviour. It provides you with a toolkit to increase competency, confidence, resilience and empathy, so you feel more assured about how to respond to distressed or dysregulated behaviours in others, including those affected by trauma, mental health, neurodiversity, learning disabilities or dementia. Build better connections, achieve de-escalation and improve outcomes for yourself and those you engage with my celebrated 6-stage target model, a step-by-step process to reduce distress for everyone. Discover my empowering, person-centered guide in Targeting the Positive, written by me, Andy Baker, available from online bookstores worldwide. Find a link in the description and order today.